Hello, today I'm repairing my Revell helicopter Prion, which I bought a couple of days ago. It flies quite well. It's about £30 in the UK, but basically after a few crashes, some of it has broken. So it actually comes with a spare rotor set and a spare tail rotor piece, which come in the box. Unfortunately those pieces didn't break, those are still fine. What's actually broken in this case is some tiny gears which are part of the drivetrain. So this has two rotors, one above and one below, but one of the gears in the drive chain, which drives the top rotor, where it's been crashed into the ceiling basically, has lost a couple of teeth. So as you can see, there's two motors in this thing, one at the back which drives the top rotor and the one at the front drives the bottom rotor. So these are the gears. These two fit on the actual rotor shaft, and these two are the intermediate ones between the motor and those gears, and the one on the left there, which is going to be quite hard to see, has lost about 3 teeth. So there are plenty of spare parts you can buy on Revell's website, Revell DE, the German version of Revell, but the gear set is not one of them. So I've written to them and asked if they can provide them. I haven't heard anything back yet. Helpfully, obviously, having two rotors and two motors, there are two of each gear. So I've actually got a good one, which is the one on the right, which is for the bottom rotor, which is still intact. So the basic plan is to try and make another one the same as the good one. And I'm going to do that by making a silicone mould and casting a new one in polyurethane casting resin. So hopefully you can see these gears a bit clearer now. This is actually the broken one, which obviously the middle teeth have broken, and the good one I've now put in this box, which I've just made out of some oil-based clay. This is clean clay, but you can use other types of oil-based clay. We're going to make a silicone mould, so we need to check that it's sulfur-free, so it doesn't inhibit the cure of the silicone rubber, but I happen to know this is. So I've just built this little box so I can pour the silicone in, and I've put the good gear right in the middle there. The other one's just there so we can see it more clearly in this lighting. So I'm going to mix up some silicone, pour it in there, and we'll make a rubber mould. So I'm using Repsil E30 for this, which is a silicone RTV. It's a fairly bog standard one which you can get on eBay in the UK. So I've mixed up a very small quantity in here, and I'm now going to attempt to pour it into this box and not get any bubbles in, which is probably the trickiest thing with something of this size. The answer is to pour it with a high, thin stream. When it eventually pours out. And there we go, and we'll leave that to cure and we'll see what comes out of it. Hopefully there won't be any air bubbles and everything will be fine. Hopefully that should let any air rise to the surface, and obviously away from the gear which is at the bottom. Right, so it's the next day. I've pulled the gear out of the rubber. Obviously this was this way up and the gear was underneath. So turning it upside down really reveals the impression where the gear was. It's okay, there's a couple of small air bubbles. You can just about see them on the pointy bits, which are the inside of the gears, on the inside of the teeth. So if casting resin goes in there, it'll make a bubble, which I can cut off with a knife, or it may just be that the gears still mesh fine. It looks a bit messy because some of the silicone went underneath, but actually we've got the definition of all of the teeth. So now I'm going to mix up some casting resin, which is smooth on. It's actually 65D, which is a rotor cast resin, but it's fine for casting solid pieces as well. You could also use 300 series resin. So I'm going to mix that up and attempt to pour a tiny cast for this. I should also point out at this stage that the manufacturer Revell have replied to my email saying that the parts are available for purchase. They haven't immediately provided a link and I can't see them on the website still, but they're going to come back to me apparently. But for now I'm going to continue and make my own gear, and obviously with this mould I'll be able to make more gears in the future if I happen to break them. So I've poured out equal quantities of the 2 containers and I'm just going to mix them together in a 3rd container and attempt to pour them in there. See, it's incredibly hard to pour such a tiny mould. I'm just going to give it a poke and see if we can get all the air out and then scrape off the surface. Okay, hopefully that's burst all the bubbles as well. Just make sure that's gone into all the details. Alright, we'll let that cure up and we'll see what it leaves us with. So the resin's gone off and it's turned solid white. So now if we're very careful, we should have the gear. Which appears to look pretty good. So the next thing is to drill the middle out and hopefully we can fit that back in the helicopter. Here's a better close-up of the gear. The one I made is on the right and the original one is on the left. It's a little bit of plastic that needs trimming just on the edge there. I can do that with a sharp knife and then we'll drill the middle out. I think the hole is about 1mm. So I've cleaned that up and got rid of the little bits of plastic that were in between each tooth, mostly. Now I'm going to use this tiny drill, which is a 0.8mm drill, to attempt to drill a tiny hole in the middle. Fortunately there's a little divot which you can't quite see where silicone went partially into the hole in the original, which makes things rather easier. Whoops, this really is tiny. So let me attempt to do this somehow. Not quite sure how I'm going to hold it. I'm just going to move the camera actually because it's becoming quite tricky. Right. Yep, there we go. If you can see that. There is now a hole all the way through the middle. And it's almost on centre as well, so I might just, I think the actual hole needs to be 1mm, so I might just try and clean that hole out a bit with that drill bit and then we'll put it back in the helicopter. Here's the close-up of the hole that I've just drilled, which is almost on centre. So there's the gear installed in the helicopter there. Seems to mesh okay, it rotates quite freely. So basic plan is to put all of this back together, all the pieces in here, and see how it flies. I've got most of the gear train back together now, so we're just going to give that a little test before I assemble the rest. Just try and hold this. Oh, yeah, seems pretty good. Feels like it's got lift, and can't tell if it's stable, but I think it's probably going to be alright. Both sets of rotors are working. Don't know if you can see the gear in the back there. Seems perfectly happy. Check all my gears are aligned. When the thing lifts, you can see the gears actually pull upwards inside, so have a look at it when it's running. Seems to be alright, which is marvellous. So I'm just going to put the rest of the body back together and we'll give it a test flight. Here's another shot of the drivetrain. Basically the white gear, the very white gear here, is the new one in there. So we're all back in one piece. It seems to fly fine. Let's just give it a go. Quite responsive. Actually a pretty good helicopter to fly. Trying to keep that in view of the camera. Oh, it's stuck on the poopy. There we go. So there we go, seems to all be working. There seems to be a slight twitch, however. It's going to be hard to show you, but now we can't really see it. There seems to be a very, very slight twitch from left to right as it's flying. It's very, very small, and I'm pretty sure that that's because I didn't drill the hole on centre on the gear, so it's spinning slightly off centre, which is causing some friction in part of the rotation. But as you can see, it flies quite well, so there we go. Still waiting to hear back from Revel to see if I can actually buy the replacement gears, but until then obviously I've got a mould, so if I happen to break another one I can make further ones.